it's the beauty of mindset, really. The whole thing about mindset is it's a set of tools that you've got in your head, and it's ultimately not even the tools, it's the beliefs you've got. You just want transformation. That's what they want. Just help me change. That's what I want, and I want it now. Getting them to change their perception, their thinking, not necessarily change the other person. And the more they do that, the less likely they are to change. It's really important to know what you want out of life and where you want to go. And there is no right or wrong, none. It's all about a choice. If you don't change, you're going to get more what you got. So if you don't like what you're getting, you've got to change. So your thoughts, definitely. If you're a stress head, you're going to have a stress body, aren't you? I think we know that. People go to the gym first thing in the morning, they go for a run, and they know that it sends out the endorphins. So what you're thinking creates chemicals in your head and sends it into your body.
Today's guest is Paul Becque, a success coach, speaker, author, and TV presenter of nearly 40 years of personal development experience. He's also a certified mindset trainer for over 15 years and has worked with organisations including the European Space Agency. He helps individuals and organisations crush fears, reshape beliefs and build resilience to unlock their potential, and was taught by none other than the author of Chicken Soup for the Soul, Jack Canfield. Is a trusted TV presenter since 2005, has been inspiring audiences worldwide to create meaningful change and design lives aligned with their deepest aspirations. So get ready to uncover the mindset and strategies for true success with Paul Becque. Hello, Paul. Welcome to the show. It's good to have you here. I know we've got a lot to talk about today. And we're looking at sort of this midlife mindset. And it's, I've been looking at a lot of research recently, and there are some interesting studies done by UCL, and it was published in Psychological Medicine. And it was talking about sort of 20% of Gen Xers, like myself, and they were looking at the years sort of in the 1970s, around that time, and also baby boomers. Like it was about 34% of baby boomers were actually stating that between the ages of 40 and 50 was when they started having these sort of struggles with anxiety, depression, psychological issues as they got to that midlife. And also the government website had a study done. It was actually published between 22 and 23. And it was talking about actually addiction. And it was saying about how people, the biggest age range that starts suffering with addiction is actually between 35 and 49 years old. And it was saying that 71% of those studied with addiction actually related to having mental health issues as well. And 2/3 of those were men and only 1/3 were women. So it's actually predominantly with men as well. So I wanted to get your thoughts on this and really explore, the struggles that people start to have when they get into that midlife, what potentially could be behind that they're not aware of. Life changes. It's a very transitional time and you have to make lots of adjustments, whether it's worried about health issues, your future, maybe you've achieved everything, you've had great success, and you've kind of lost your identity, you've lost your purpose in life. So I'd really love to get into this subject with you because I know it's a lot to discuss, but you have a lot of experience at coaching people in this time of their life, whether it's in their career or in this midlife period. Would like to just get to know a little bit about, what your thoughts are and what you've discovered over the years.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you just shared all this scientific, information and all these measurements that have been taken. And the good news is because there is so much science behind all of this today, people kind of trust it more. Whereas 20, 30 years ago, when you talk about personal development, it was kind of very ethereal and, it's the power of positive thinking. And people didn't really trust it or believe it. But because of neuroscience, because it's come so far, now it's like, this is how it works. A little bit like understanding gravity. We know gravity works, right? We know that works because we're all experiencing it. We know we're not floating off in the sky. But when it comes to what's going on in here, we're not really sure what it is. So getting all these measurements, getting all these surveys, getting all these statistics is really, really helpful. And it makes people trust it a little bit more. I personally don't think anything's changed. I think this has been going on for century after century after century. It's all part of the human experience. But what has changed is our own expectations of ourselves. And I think a more recent agreement to that would be social media, the way that that's changing lives for youngsters. They're now seeing all these video clips and they think, I should look like that, or I should act like that. I should have a car like this. I should make that sort of money. And that's what's changing their lives. Whereas if you go back 70 years, people were just happy to get through the war. People were just happy to get their coupons and go collect a meal. So that's really the big change. And now that everything's pretty good in the UK, I know there's a lot of political disturbance right now, but on the whole, things aren't too bad. So we want more and more and more and more. We're not happy just to have a house and a car and a job and make an income and maybe have a wife and a family. We want it to be perfect. And so our expectations are very, very high. And I personally think that the midlife crisis is when somebody is where they are, wherever that might be, and it's their perception of where they are. They might be really well off compared to somebody else, but they don't see it, and their expectation of where they should be. And when there's a big gap between where they are and where they think they should be, that's where the pain comes in. And that's really what I help people to overcome. That's what I help people close that gap, find inner peace, and then move towards the goals that they would like. So I'm not saying don't have the bigger house, the bigger car, the perfect relationship, the kids, whatever it is you want, that £1,000,000 a year. It doesn't matter to me what it is. It's just your idea of what life should look like. So let's
Yeah.
move towards it, but let's be happy now. And I think all these statistics and everything you're sharing with me just proves that that's true.
Yeah. And would you say that the reason it is seems to be such a problem for many people in their midlife, is it because, as you were saying, times have changed and the youth of today probably have a very different aging experience to maybe what people like you and me had? But is it that sort of looking back in life and thinking, well, this is all achievable now, but I'm too old, or I can't do this because I'm getting older? And it's almost like that sense of no matter how much you have had success and achieved, you get to a point where you're looking at what's going on in the modern world and trying to figure out, well, maybe I'm not as successful or didn't achieve as much as I should have. And I don't have as much time. And those fears about, getting older, not having enough time, health worries, all that kind of stuff. And those anxiety, your sort of future focus, but in a more anxious way.
I think
Has that got anything to do with it?
Well, I think it's the beauty of mindset, really. The whole thing about mindset is it's a set of tools that you've got in your head, and it's ultimately not even the tools, it's the beliefs you've got. So I'm 60, and if you think at 60 you're old, you're probably going to be somewhat old, and you might act like you're old because you're going to act like you think a 60-year-old should. Personally, I think I'm 36. In my head, I don't know why that specific number, but for probably the last 10 years, I felt like I'm 36, and I tend to act like a 36-year-old. My youngest kid's only 9 years of age. I've got 4 beautiful kids. I'd like to think they keep me young, and just thinking that way is probably keeping me young. And it's the same with your work. If you think that work is tough or it's too late, you're probably setting yourself up to believe that. And because you believe it, and think about it, a belief is just a thought you've had over and over and over again. And that could be something that you learned from mum and dad. Maybe dad passed away when he was 60. So you think 60 is old because you could die at 60. Yet there's so many different variations of what that might be. It could have been a neighbor passed away. It could have been an uncle passed away. But there's that little idea in your head, and you've held on to it for many, many, many years. And you probably heard the term self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm a big fan of that. I think that's exactly how life works. If you believe that this is going to happen, there's a very good chance that it's going to happen. And so what I do, I take people through a system. I have a system because I think it's really important to understand what the levels are. Sometimes you read a book and it's all very exciting, but if you don't know what's next, and then what's after that, and then what's after that, and then what's after that, you haven't got a roadmap. You haven't got something to follow. You haven't got a guide. You haven't got a GPS. And so I'm a big fan of laying it out for people what the layers are so that they can progressively work on their mindset and change it little by little by little. This is not an overnight fix. You can't suddenly say, okay, that guy said he thinks he's 36. I think I'm 36. And you might hold on to that for a few hours. You might hold it for a couple of days. In fact, perfect example of this, when people go to a big event, let's say, I'm not going to drop names, but let's say one of the most famous coaches on the planet has an event at the O2, and there are literally thousands of people there. And the music's pumping and everyone's screaming and shouting and getting all excited. And they are fully motivated. In fact, I would say they're activated at that point. And they come out of the event and they're like, I'm going to change my life. I'm so excited. I can do anything. And 2 weeks later, they're back to normal. And that's because we're creatures of habit, and they've gone back to their default thoughts, their default beliefs. And now all that stuff just slides away. And that's a really, really key piece of information, because if people can understand that motivation is temporary, it's more important to get into motion, and then what I like to call momentum. And that's really by starting to see, not just hearing or not just reading about a way forward, but experiencing it and feeling the change. You're going, oh my goodness, this stuff works. That changes everything.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you say, it's like you've got to take off those layers, in terms of some of these things can be, ideas, beliefs, values that you've had for decades. It's not just something necessarily that's been there suddenly overnight. Very often, you were talking earlier about, maybe your parent died early. And so you kind of, in some sort of subconscious way, got it stuck in your mind that when I reach 60 or whatever age it may be for you, that's when it kind of all ends, and you're sort of almost presuming that life is going to be terrible after a certain time, which comes down to your belief systems. But also it all goes into subconscious as well, because you don't always know that you're doing it or why you're doing it. This is the thing. What are your thoughts on sort of subconscious thought and how that's then affecting your experience? Is that too big? Too big a subject?
No. It's my favourite subject.
I loved it.
Because when I was very fortunate. I left the UK when I was 20, and I kind of ran away, and I ended up in the Caribbean. And while I was out there, somebody handed me a book called The Power of Positive Thinking. And this is my very first step towards personal development. So I've kind of been spiritual, and I dabbled in spirituality, tried to talk to ghosts and stuff like that before, but never got contact. Tried to speak to God, never got contact. So for me, that realm didn't really exist. And I thought it was a nice idea, but it didn't work. But the power of positive thinking hit home quite hard. But in that particular book, it's from the 1950s. Norman Vincent Peale would have written that. And there were lots of religious context, lots of religious statements, things out of the Bible in there. And so that still made me think, well, God didn't talk to me, so I'm not sure how real this stuff is. But my second book was The Power of the Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. And even though that was written in the 60s, I still think that book is very, very pertinent today. And so I guess that was a scientific information for me. And so I believe that science. Maybe that's why the science is so important to me today. I don't like it to be ethereal. I like it to be factual. That's why I'm a big fan of neuroscience, because it's facts that people want to hear. Although I am now a big fan of spirituality too. However, going into the subconscious mind, just finish this train of thought. I know I'll forget it.
No, please.
But ultimately, there's an image that gets batted around all the time, and it's like a giant iceberg. And 10% of your thoughts, that's your conscious mind, is above the water. That's what you see. That's what you experience. The other 90% is beneath the water. And so that's your subconscious mind. That's what you don't see. And those are those things that you believe. And if you believe them, but even though you don't think about them, they're just there, they will help you determine what actions you take or don't take. They will be firing your fear or firing up your courage, because they're underneath. They're almost like your operating system, just like a computer. You get to see what it can do. Let's say that's 10%. The other 90% is on the microchip. You can't see it, or it's out on the cloud. You don't see it, but that's the real work. And there's 90% that you cannot see.
Yeah. And that fear, actually, it's what you say about fear. Because when people think, if you said to someone, oh, you're just fearful of something, they're going to react to that, and they're going to say, no, I'm not scared of anything. Look at what I've achieved, like what I've had to overcome over the years. It's not a fear. But it is, like you say, it goes beyond the conscious thought. It's what's been pre-programmed into you, and it's been a habit that's been there for years and years. And whatever is going on now, once you reach this age, suddenly, without realizing, it's triggering this response.
It's important to break it down as well, life into different segments, because your example there was, oh, you're just fearful, you're afraid, and they go, no, I'm not. Look what I've done. Well, if they might be saying then they're not fearful in their career, they're not fearful in taking steps forward, they're not fearful investing their money. They might have done stocks and shares, they might have made a load of money in cryptocurrency, and they might have been very brave in their career choices, might have started their own company. So in that respect, they see themselves as really brave and a good earner of money, and they're doing well. However, their childhood might have taught them that marriage can be very difficult. And again, this is your perception. You can have parents that are arguing all the time, and now you've got a perfectly good life. In fact, that's my situation. My parents argued, my dad threw stuff at my mum and beat my mum. All sorts of awful stuff happened, and I could have made the decision to copy that. That's how life is. But I made the decision not to copy that, and to ensure my life was not like that. And so I think that's a really pertinent statement there, because at any moment in your life, you get the opportunity to go this way or this way all day long, this way or this way. fear or courage, fear or courage, fear or courage. And you decide, and that will determine where you are today. So I was very fortunate that I grew up making a very, very strong determination in my life that I would not be like my dad. And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking him. It's just the way his life was. And I've made friends in the last 20 years. But it was a tough childhood. And I think a lot of people would have come out of that with a very different choice for what life is all about. And I was lucky in the fact that these books got handed to me. But even there's a choice. I could read the book or go, yeah, not for me, and put it to one side. But I read the book. And more importantly, the second one, I started to follow some of the ideas in that book. And that's when I started to experience, oh, this stuff's working. This stuff's working. And so that grew it. And that for me, that is going from the motivation. The motivation was the book and some of the ideas in it. Trying some of those ideas out is the emotion, getting mobilized, and then really doing 2 or 3 or 4 exercises and getting success. That's when you move into momentum. So I operate in exactly that same way today.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to, like you said, getting a choice to do things. That's why peeling off those layers, and it takes time. It's not an overnight thing. Like you said previously, you can't just wake up and say, "Oh, I'm going to do this." It's very easy to be positive in the moment, but it's maintaining that for the long term. So peeling off those layers, going back, dealing whatever a past issue or a subconscious issue that is now triggering you to not be able to move forward or feel you can't move forward, and then getting to the point where you're able to make those more positive choices and be more motivated to actually, when an opportunity comes your way, to learn, develop, improve, and move forward, to take those opportunities, even if they can be a little bit tough, because no one's saying it's easy, especially as you're getting older, because it's that you're kind of stuck in your ways, as people like to say, and making those changes a little bit harder. So finding your purpose or motivation.
We're all creatures of habit, aren't we? This is what I think I find absolutely kind of enjoyable because of the position I'm in life right now. But actually, it's fundamental to what I do. We all operate the same way. I mean, we're human beings. I know some of us might have more limbs than others, or we might only have one eye. Things like that are slightly different. And then there's all these conditions that we hear of today, like ADHD. I'm a big fan that's a superpower. That doesn't hold you back. It's a superpower. But again, it's just your perception of it. So if you see something like ADHD as a superpower, that can help propel you forward. But if you see that as something that's really stopping you, well, then that's going to be true. And that's going to help you determine worse choices, things that might hold you back. You say, well, I couldn't do that because I've got ADHD. That's just one example. But the important thing for me here is that we are all fundamentally operating in the same way. We've got a heart, we've got a body, we've got a mind, we've got a brain. And we are creatures of habit because of the way the brain works, because of the way the mind operates. We hold on to all these experiences that we've had. And I have actually a system that I help people to identify all of their values, their self-identity, their beliefs, the experiences they've had in life, bring all of these together so that they can now start to understand why they operate in the way they do. And so then it's just a matter of going into the operating system and tweaking a few things, and that can change everything. So it's a little bit like, again, a computer, and we are the hardware, but we can go in and change the software. And that could be adding a new program or just updating that program. So it's still the same program that you use for many, many years, but now there's updates. If you've got Microsoft Word, I'm sure you've seen that update. And the older you are, the more you've seen it update. If you've got a phone, whether it's Google or an iPhone, you've seen that get updated all the time. And these are just improvements. So one of the things I teach my clients immediately is that they've got to evolve their mindset. And this is exactly why you talk about the layers being peeled back, and it's an evolution. So let's find out what you think right now, and then let's tweak some of those tiny little things so that you can start operating in a better way and moving towards your goals. And that the reason I believe I can help anyone is because we all work in the same way. It's just that our operating system is different, but it's the same hardware.
So when someone comes to you for a problem, whatever it be, whether it's relationship, money, health, whatever it may be, what are the main, actually, what are some of the main concerns people come to you for?
Well, I work with lots of entrepreneurs, lots of business people, lots of people that are trying to push their career further forward. So I give myself the title, I've tweaked it over the years, but the one that I found to be the most pertinent is the fact that I'm a success coach. So I can help people find success in their life and that includes fulfillment. It's really important to be fulfilled. That's a big part. A lot of people are very wealthy and rich, but not happy. And I always say, if you got happiness, you got everything. I'll give you a perfect example of that shortly. And then my second part of my title is mindset trainer. So the reason for that is I believe that there are two skills that I have and that I use. So the trainer is like being a teacher. And so you can share information with people, but it doesn't mean it changes their lives. It can be great information. It can be the best information. It's like going and reading a good book. It's like going on a course. It's like going to a 5-day seminar and getting all excited, but it doesn't change you. It could, I'm not saying it won't, but there's a very good chance you're just going to go back to your default operating system, and you're going to go back to your habits, and you're going to operate like that again. So that's when the motivation happens, and then it all comes crashing down. So then the success coach part is important, because being a coach means that I can work with anyone, because I don't know the answers for you yet. I don't need to know the answers. They are inside you. And so the difference in these two skills is a trainer throws information at people, and the coach extracts information from people, because they know what they want. They know what the best way forward is. And so you've got to work with them and where they are and help them get to where they want to be. But when I trained as a coach 15 years ago, I was taught you just ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. And I understand that. And I believe in the philosophy of coaching. I think it's brilliant. And it's become more and more mainstream. And now they even use it in corporations. HR teams have got a coach in very often today. However, I also believe it's really important to share information with people. So by sharing something, they've got an opportunity then to embrace that new piece of information and use it. And if they start to play with it and use it, then they can experience that little change. And once they get that light bulb moment and go, oh my God, this works, then they embrace it more. And so then the training with the coaching really, really, really works well. And so I'm really proud of the fact that I broke away from mainstream coaching and decided to follow my own philosophy, my own heartbeat, which was I've got to share information and help people see slightly differently. But then the coaching helps them to believe it, because I can talk to them at their level. I can talk to them at where they are, and I can reframe it and put it in context that's important to them.
So, you've studied neuroscience and you use that as well as sort of the more spiritual aspects of it, and the more holistic approach to it. So how do you sort of intertwine that with the way you coach people and help people?
Yeah, I won't actually throw lots of facts and figures at the client, because that's not really going to help them. And often they're like, it goes over their head. And ultimately they come to me because they want change. They want transformation. And it's the transformation that I will focus on and help them with. However, depending on the way they think, like if somebody, for example, is auditory digital in their way of thinking. Sorry, some people don't know what that means. It's just a way of communicating, and it means they're very, very logical. So if they're very logical and they need everything to be backed up with facts and figures, then this can be a great way to go. And so I could start to talk about the fact that a belief is something that you think of over and over and over again, so much so that it becomes a belief. And a good example of that would be if you just thought of something. In fact, here's a really good example: affirmations. So unfortunately, a lot of people these days don't believe in affirmations. They think it's old hat and it doesn't work. And the reason for that is that they don't have the consistency of doing it day in and day out and day in and day out. And so they might just do it now and again. They might remember, oh, I've got to do my affirmations today, and they forgot. And if they're not committed to them and connected to them, it's not going to help. So the idea here is that if you said, let's say it's finances is your problem, and you were saying, I love money and money loves me. When you first start saying that, you might be like, this is bullshit. And you don't believe it in any way whatsoever. And just think of it, the first time you say it, think of that as walking through a field or a meadow with lots of long grass. And you make a little trail through it. But when you turn back, you can't even see where you've been. The wind's blown the grass and it's all disappeared. But if you were to walk over that path day in and day out, let's say a month, the same thing, money loves me and I love money, money loves me and I love money, whatever the affirmation might be, the chances are then the grass starts to lay flat. And if you turn back, you can see the pathway. And of course, if you keep going over it and over it and over it and over it, it's then like you've laid cement over the top or tarmac over the top. And then eventually it goes from being a walkway to being a pathway to becoming a road to becoming a highway or a motorway. And so it just gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. So much so that you absolutely believe it. And that is proven in neuroscience. Something you think once doesn't change anything. But once you start to think it over and over and over again, it makes a big difference. And what you can literally do, they call it pruning, you can literally start to prune away bad thoughts, negative thoughts. And so this is why the term mind mastery is so important. And then the one to follow that is emotional management. Two big things that I love to help people with, because if you can start to master your mind, your life will change. And when you master your mind, your emotions will change. And once you start to master those emotions, life will change even more.
Yeah, and it is like you say, emotions, because someone once told me, and I like to use it a lot, it's a good phrase, that when emotions are high, intelligence is low. And very much when we're struggling with some issue in our life, usually our emotions take over. And that's when we start making mistakes or avoiding things or not taking those risks out of the coming back to the fears and the anxieties and all that. So in your experience, I mean, how would somebody think, right, okay, I've tried everything. Maybe this is something I need to be looking into, looking at my choices, my story, my backstory, my belief system. Is this something that I now need to explore? Because obviously for many people, it's still a bit, out there. This kind of, well, this is who I am. This is the way it is. I have to accept it. There's nothing I can do about it. And then they start spiraling down and getting worse and worse and sinking into more sort of depression and things like that. So how can somebody start to recognize that this is something that would really benefit them and could really transform their lives? And and they'll start finding in once they hit that 40-50 mark, actually it's more of a transformative way in a positive way, your life, rather than necessarily being a time when you have to close down, you're too old and you can't move forward.
So if somebody's going to try and do that on their own, and they know that they're maybe, let's call it in pain, and that's just uncomfortable, not enjoying life. That's what I mean by in pain. It doesn't have to be physical, but they're mentally upset, they're anxious, they're always tired, maybe they're angry. And the problem is, when we do this day in and day out, sometimes people are angry and they don't even know it, because that is their default mode. They've been, you might have a teacher. Think of a teacher that you had was really miserable, and yet if you spoke to them, they probably have no idea that they were miserable. It's just the way they are, the term you just used. And so the first thing they need to do is identify what they would like to change, and then what they would like their life to look like. So those are the first two things. They've got to get really clear on that. So if they say, right, I know I'm happy because I want to change my job, or I know I'm unhappy because she don't love me anymore, or they know they're unhappy because they just haven't got the money they want. That's a good start. Identify what it is. Then identify why. Why is the money you've got not enough? Are you just saying, well, I worked too hard for it? Because you can change that quite easily. Or are you saying, I just can't afford to live like this anymore? Do you need to? You might be able to change that quite easily. And then once you've identified the area that it is that you want to change, I would suggest, if you want to do it on your own, get some books around that particular area. And these days, there are millions of books. Jump online and you can find a book with no difficulty whatsoever. Now, unfortunately, I've got hundreds of books in front of me, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And I will tell you that they're all great, but it depends where you are in your life. So I could read one book today and it might not hit home, but in 3 years' time, I could reread it and go, oh my God, I get it now. And that's happened to me many, many times. So I've been buying books for the last 40 years, and there are books that I might have read 10 years ago, and they didn't really hit home. I thought, it's interesting, but it's not really me. And now, because I've changed, because I've got another 10 years of learning and growing and evolving myself, now I might read it and go, oh my goodness, that's the bit I was looking for. I had it all the time and I didn't get it. And so then what they've got to start doing is taking tiny little steps in the right direction. And even if they were to work with a coach, that's what I would recommend. Sometimes people think when you go and work with a coach, it's going to change your life 90 degrees or 180 degrees, turn your life around altogether. If a coach tries to do that to you and tells you what you're doing wrong, I would say that's the wrong coach. Because the minute you try to change your life ginormous, a good example for you, diets. So we go on a diet, we change what we eat, and we're miserable. We hate it. We don't even like it. But I want to get thin. I want to get thin. I want to get thin. I'm going to do it. And we could get the results we want. It's brilliant. I've lost a pound. I've lost 2 pounds. That builds up the momentum. You go, great. And you're going to follow it and maybe do it for a month. And you've lost 2, 3, 4 pounds. Brilliant. You're really excited by that. But then you go back to your old habits. And as we hear time and time again, the weight comes back on. And now we're back to where we were. This stuff don't work. And that's not the case. What it is that you maybe change so much so quickly rather than twin. This is the neuroscience. This is what neuroscience will back up. Change a tiny little task at a time and then reward yourself for it. Rewards are a big part of this. You must reward yourself. So if you lose a pound, great. Now, don't necessarily mean now I can go and eat a bar of chocolate. It could be, that could be your reward. If you've lost a pound, maybe a bar of chocolate's okay. But I would say that's kind of leading back to your old habits. Maybe go see a movie or go do something that you really enjoy. It might be an art gallery. I don't know what you enjoy, but do something you love and say, this is a treat to myself. Well done. And then grow on it and grow on it and grow on it. And then add a little thing. And it's the same in all areas. So that could be with relationships. It could be with career. It could be with finances. You just tweak a little bit and move in the right direction. And probably most people listening will say they've heard the term joy is in the journey. That's what life is all about. It's the journey. It's not getting there. And really, that's what this is. Those tiny little tweaks are just a matter of, I'm getting there. And then when you look back at the last year, the last 2 years, the last 5 years, you go, oh my goodness, look how much my life has changed. And somebody said, there was a famous quote a few years ago, that people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And I think that's really, really true, because we just want to do these little incremental changes and move in the right direction rather than thinking, I want it now. How do I change now? Because that's going to be a temporary change and it will go back to as it was. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. No, another thing I want to ask you is, when you have a client with you, what's your process for sort of getting them from being very stuck, maybe somewhat resistant, or maybe some really digging their heels in and said, challenging you on that they know what they're doing and, fighting with you a little bit, pushing back on you a little bit with your methods. How do you take them there? What's your process for taking them there to getting to this point where they're actually really fully on board, really engaged and ready to make the right choices and take that step forward, and also being, like being able to maintain it for the long term, because that's the key at the end. You want them to go along and be sticking with it, not reverting back.
Interestingly enough, when I first learned to be a coach, they teach you a system and there's a format to follow, and I get that, and I think it is useful and it can work for most coaches. But because of the way I decided to work, again, what I do, this I guess is my own system, is the number one thing is meet them where they are, get to know them. And so this is the big difference between training and coaching. If I'm training, if I've got a group of 20, 40, 60 people, or a webinar with hundreds of people on it, then it's only training. You're sharing information. That is not coaching. But when you have a one-to-one conversation with somebody, this is where the power is, because now it's me talking to you. And by being curious, I can get deep inside you and understand what you're all about. And by listening really, really effectively, I can pick up on little things that you say that will be clues to me about what you believe. And remember, it's your belief system that creates your life. So if you've got a room full of people, you can't understand all their belief systems. You're kind of throwing seeds out and helping people. Whereas now on a one-to-one call, chatting to somebody, I can dig down deep and I get very, very, very curious. I get as deep as I can, as quickly as I can. The first thing that I would do for the client, just as I was saying a few minutes ago, is get them to have clarity of what they want first. So they've got to understand what it is they want. Most people are pretty good at that. I want more money. I want this. I want that. I want a bigger car. I want a bigger house. I want that promotion. They have some idea, but actually they haven't drilled down into the details and don't know what that might look like. So they just have this very general idea of what they want. A good example of that is I want more money. So then, well, why is that? What will your life look like if you got more money? How much money is that? And people sometimes don't know. So they could be on, let's say, 60,000 a year. And you say, so how much do you want to be on? Do you want to double your income? And suddenly they're like, oh, I couldn't do that. Oh, I couldn't double my income. So you realize then that their fear steps in and they don't see themselves being on 120 a year. Whereas you could be speaking to somebody that's already making $1 million, and then you talk to them about doubling it and they're like, yeah, let's double it. And so you've got to meet them where they are and find out how they operate. It's back to that operating system. And then you take a deep dive on that and start to give them little seeds of motivation and see what lights them up. And then I couldn't tell you I always go to a technique first because everyone's different. But by talking to them, having a conversation with them, I can find out what they're enjoying, what they like, what works for them. I can find out where they are. Some people might say to me, oh yeah, I know all of these different names. I've been doing personal development 20 years. Then I can get ahead leaps and bounds. And if I know who that they've studied with, or maybe they've even been on courses or what books they've read, that helps me move in that direction even faster. Yeah. If they say to me they've got no experience of this at all, never worked with a coach, don't really know what personal development is, then I'm going to take it very, very easy and help them move forward. But if you put me in a corner and say, well, you've got to have a process in place, I can share it with you. So the very first thing I do, I teach people a system called Engage, and the first letter of Engage is E, and that stands for evolve. So it's 6 tenets for success. And the evolve is where I actually show them that pathway I talked about. So I find out if they're in self-repression, which means that they could be depressed, they could be suppressing their feelings. It's a dark place. And unfortunately, I have clients that are like that. And then where most people are is the next one, which is self-restriction. And so they're holding themselves back. They're restricting their own lifestyle. And that can mean that they're trying really, really, really hard to push forward. They're trying to get ahead. They're working harder. They're reading books. They're doing all these things, but they're still holding themselves back. And that's the unconscious. That's the subconscious limiting beliefs that keep stepping in, and they can't see them. So that's where I've got to help them. So then the next step after, once they understand that and they can see that they're restricting their own life, I then get them to move into what I call self-recognition. And that's recognizing what their thoughts are. And there are lots of different ways I can do that. But once they start to commit to that and they realize, oh my God, I'm being negative again. I'm being negative again. I got upset again. What are my triggers? What set me off? That's really, really important, because once they start to see that, once we can put the spotlight on the issues, we can start to rectify it. So the next level is called self-regulation. And they start to regulate their negative thinking, regulate their limiting beliefs. And that takes time. It doesn't have to be years and years and years. It can literally be days. It's all down to how much work they put in, how committed they are to the system. And I like to do a 90-day challenge, and that can be life-changing for some people. Anyway, I just continue my way through the journey so you see my system. So I'd say recognition and regulation is where most people are. If they're entrepreneurs, they're business people, they just want to make more money. They're very materialistic. They just want to get this done. And so those two levels is where I really focus, and I help them, and they move forward dramatically. But once they realize that now up here, the way they're thinking is starting to craft their life, and by changing their thoughts, they start to create their reality, then they move into the next level, which is self-reflection. Now, I'm not talking about reflecting on your life, because I call that self-analysis, and we do that. There's a deep dive on that if necessary. But self-reflection is when you come to this understanding that actually the world is a reflection of what's going on in here. And that's that self-fulfilling prophecy we talked about at the beginning of the conversation. So only when they start to understand that they can recognize and regulate, okay, I am in control, things are changing because I'm changing, then they get to really understand self-reflection. And then only a few people go to this level, but those that really start enjoying it and want to go down the spiritual route, we then go into the last one, which is self-realization. And that's where you just become really at ease, lots of inner peace, and start enjoying life. And then you're loving it so much, you just want to help everyone else because you've got everything you need.
And that's kind of what people want. They want that transformation. I mean, what have you, from your sort of case studies, as you like, what have the transformations been for people after working with you? And, how has that benefited their life moving forward? What changes have they seen that's really been a surprise for them?
It depends on the individual. So if people come to me and they want to get promotion, there's a very, very good chance they're going to get that promotion, or they're going to come to the understanding that actually they didn't want the promotion. They want to change job altogether. So that's where the transformation is. But I've had it when people come to you and they say it's about their career. They want to change their job. They're not happy anymore. They want to get promotion. And then it turns out that something happened. They got divorced a year ago, or mum died 3 years ago. And that was a psychological challenge. And that's changed everything for them. And it's actually that's the problem. It's nothing to do with the job. They actually like the job, but they're just becoming unhappy because they're very unsettled about what's life all about. Losing someone that you love, and the closer they are, like a parent, a partner, a child, that will shake your life up, and that make you wonder what life is all about. And so once, by getting curious, if I can come to the understanding that actually it's not their job at all, it's because you lost mum 3 years ago, then we can go down that route and I can help with that. And then, hey, if they still want to change their job, then we go after it. But the important key is to find out what they really, really, really want, what the real problems are, and fixing those first. And then once you've done that, we can move towards what they want. So entrepreneurs, often they've got an idea, they haven't even started their company yet, and they start a company and they go on to be a success. Sometimes it's a business that's already up and running and they just want to be more successful. So again, I was a big fan of double your income, double your time off. People come to me with relationship problems and they're struggling with that. And again, it's getting them to change their perception, their thinking, not necessarily change the other person. So if someone is listening and they've got problems with a relationship, they've got to go inward, not outward. They've got to work on themselves, not on their partner. And I know I've been through this. You're saying what happens when people are giving you a difficult time. They will argue at the beginning, but it's not me, it's her, it's her, it's her, it's her. And the more they do that, the less likely they are to change. They have to come to the understanding, and I give them some tasks that will give them the opportunity to understand it. And if they embrace those, then they can start to see the shift and go, aha, this stuff works. And then off we go. So it's really, it can be anything. It's for anyone. It's another good example for you then, ADHD, where people have come to me and they think it's a big problem, it's holding them back. And now by getting them to reframe that and see that as a very positive power, as being a superpower, and I have like 12 reasons why it's a superpower, and we work on each of those week after week after week, or month after month, depending on their budget. And the more we can work together, the faster they can change. So it can literally be anything.
Mm. So, I mean, I can certainly resonate with some of what you're saying, because not so long ago, a few years ago, I suddenly realised in my car driving that actually the problems I was having was nothing to do with anybody else. People were going to behave the way they were, but I could suddenly change just by changing my behaviours and my attitude and my perception of things. And sometimes I say you think I've been doing this for decades. Why didn't I know about this earlier? Because you can have this sort of problem for decades, not realize it. So having that opportunity to actually dig a bit deeper into, your own story, because this is, is something that keeps coming up, particularly in these podcasts, is talking about your own story and the relevance of that, and how that can be blocking you from moving forward. And particularly as you're getting older, you have decades of this. So having a process like this is really helpful, so it doesn't become so overwhelming, because that I think can be a problem. And certainly for me, I'm going to be 57 this year, and thinking about your future and how much you want to achieve can become overwhelming. So you really need to take those little baby steps like you're suggesting, and having that process is going to be so helpful for you. And knowing that, just because you're old doesn't mean it's, you can't get through this and then enjoy the later years of your life. And you can. And I've seen people a lot older than me, a fantastic life, healthy, active, and having that purpose. But is it, like you were just saying, is almost as if you need to have that purpose. Sometimes like as you say, you think the problem that you're having, the problem's never the problem in that sense. Maybe it is, you're lacking a bit of purpose, or you can't see what that purpose is because it's in your subconscious somewhere.
I think it's really important to know what you want out of life and where you want to go. And there is no right or wrong, none. It's all about a choice. So if you just want to be, let's say, 60, some guys are going to be grandparents at 60. So maybe their kids have already grown up and left the nest. And so apparently this happens a lot to ladies. When the kids leave the house, they've now got this void. And now what do I do? Just find something else that you love to do. And you say, I can't. Of course you can. If you say you can't, then you can't. That's just a choice. You've decided you can't. Okay, go with that then. And be miserable. So you've got to pivot. You've got to decide, I can. So really, I think I'm going to say I was fortunate. I'm not actually a fan of luck. I don't really believe in luck. But I think, I look back now and think of my tough childhood as a great thing, because that was my motivation to find out what life was all about. And I thought, there's got to be more to life than being parents that argue and hate each other. There's got to be. And so that's why I started looking at an early age. What else is there? What else is there? What else is there?
Yeah.
And that's why probably I gravitated to these books, that new information. I'm interested. Let me read about it. And I promise you, I'm not a bright spark. I was rubbish in school. I got like 2 O levels, or called O levels in those days. And
Me too.
that's the education I got. I went to grammar school, came out with 2 out of 7 O levels, and didn't go back to school again. That was it. Job done, finished. And I've got to find there's got to be more to life. And so that really was where my journey began. It got me to the Caribbean, got those books. And because of my relationship with my dad, he called me useless, told me I've been nothing all my life. And so I wanted to prove to him, again, this is a choice. I could have decided to believe him. That would have been one choice. And I dare say some people in that situation might have done and say, well, I'm just stupid. They told me all my life I am. But I was like, I basically want to put my fingers up to my dad, and prove to him that I was somebody in something. And so I worked really, really, really hard. And I made a shed load of money by the time I was 26. And I will attribute it to those books. Those books gave me lots of different ideas, made me think in a different way. Otherwise, I would only know to think the way that I've been taught by my mum and dad, which is what's true for most of us. We go to school, we're with some peers, we might go to work, and we learn what we learn. A perfect example of that. So there are 2 big learning periods of our lives, 0 to 7. And again, you can go online and read all this, Google it, feel free. If you're thinking, really, go check it all out. And this is the beauty of neuroscience and the way that science backs up all these facts these days. So 0 to 7, you're like a sponge and you're mopping everything up and you're just learning how life works. So you can imagine at that age, you could take a kid from China, drop them off in the UK, and they're going to go up speaking English with a British accent. And if they're living with British parents, they're going to turn out to be British, even though they might look Asian. And you could take a British kid, drop them in China at 1 year of age, and they're going to go up, they're going to be Chinese, and they're going to think like the Chinese, and they're going to live like the Chinese. Job done. And then the next big learning period is from your early teens until you're about 35. And that's really when you're trying to work out exactly what life is. And this is when you're really creating this belief system now, what I like to call the operating system. And by the time you get to 35, everything is pretty much in place. And so once you get to 35, it's going to get harder and harder and harder to change. So again, I was fortunate that I came across those books at 20 years of age. So I started nice and early. But the great news is neuroscience proved that you can change it anytime you want. You can change it at 70, at 80, at 90. It's just a matter of thinking differently. That's all it is. So it's never too late. But the vast majority of people, 35 and older, that they're stuck in their ways. And they're going to use those terms you said, it's just the way I am. If they haven't done any personal development, it doesn't interest them, then they're just going to keep repeating the patterns over and over and over. In fact, I often say to clients, if you don't change, I can give you a good idea of where you're going to be in the next 5 years. And if
and where do you think that will be? If someone doesn't make those changes today.
If you don't change, you're just going to keep repeating what you've done, and it's going to be more of the same, right? So a good example I like to use of that is when you go for a job, what's the document they want to see? CV. Because that is literally showing them what you've done in the past. So by looking through your CV, they can see if you rose to the ranks, if you, after promotions, you stayed with one company for a long time, or maybe you're someone that just jumps around and jumps around and jumps around and jumps around. And they could even look at that. If your salary is listed on it, they can work out, okay, they're changing jobs regularly because they're after more money, more money, more money. So there's a history there, and they can understand your pattern and where you operate. Same with insurance. When you go to get your insurance, when you're driving, they might ask you, you've got speeding tickets. What's happened to you in the past? Because that's an indication of what's likely to happen in the future. And so once you start to realize that, you can now start to understand the trajectory of your life. And if you don't change, you're going to get more what you got.
Yeah.
So if you don't like what you're getting, you got to change.
And it comes down to that choice. Do you want to end your life well, or do you want to keep going, like you say, keep going the way you are? And then, that's not only just feeding into what results you get moving forward, but also feeds into your health as well. It's that stress, that emotional turmoil is going to feed into your body, and you're going to have a much worse aging process.
Agreed. Psychosomatic, that's what they call that.
Yeah.
So your thoughts, definitely. If you're a stress head, you're going to have a stressed body, aren't you? I think we know that. People go to the gym first thing in the morning, they go for a run, and they know that it sends out the endorphins. So what you're thinking creates chemicals in your head and sends it into your body.
So really making that step, taking that step from today and making those changes is not just about helping your positive mindset. It's helping your health. It's helping your whole life moving forward, your relationships, your wealth, you know, how you operate in the world, what purpose you have and how fulfilled you become and the quality of life moving forward, which is kind of, I think, what I would assume most people want to have, that quality of life they'll be able to look back in the ends of their days and just say, wow, I had a good run and I have nothing to regret.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, you know, clients, they're looking for something or they think they want something and they can tell you what it is. But then with a little bit of time and thought, self-analysis, as I call it, they actually come to the understanding they've got everything they want. So why are they chasing more money? Why are they chasing more stress by getting a promotion at work when actually they are really happy? But most of us, we don't take the opportunity to stop and think, have I got what I want? Or what do I really, really, really want? And so to a certain degree, just like the kids today, they're driven by TikTok and YouTube and Facebook and seeing all this social media stuff and seeing what other people do. Half the time, that's all bullshit anyway. People are posting. I stopped all the social media stuff. I know it's good for marketing and all these things, but I've stopped it all because half the time it's all bullshit. And now with AI, oh my God, half the videos aren't even real. It's just all bullshit. And they're getting it off of AI and they got the text off of AI and now they've got a voice doing it and it's not even a real voice. So I'm a huge fan. In fact, this year I might even launch into it's a bit of a rant really, because there's so much AI on social media now that I'm thinking I'm just going to jump on and be live, just live, because
there's no hiding then.
Yeah, don't be trusting all these videos. And I know they might make nice graphics and put great pictures up, but actually it's probably not even a person talking. So they've nicked the stuff of AI and now they've got a voice projecting it and now they put some video on it. Job done. It drives me crazy. And I'm seeing more and more and more of that. I'm a huge fan of YouTube. Love YouTube. It's been a really great tool, but more and more and more is absolute bull. So
this is why podcasting is great, because it's people, genuine people talking.
Agreed. 100% agreed. Yeah.
So what's next? What is next for Paul Becque in 2025? What can people get excited about?
I'm going to do more of what I'm doing because I am very lucky that I do love what I do. So I'm really in a good place. This year, there's a couple of giant things coming my way. So I do the one-to-one coaching. That's my absolute passion. Meeting people on a very, very deep level is my joy. I'm not a fan. You know, lots of people like to go to the pub and just talk about things, or even at work, how are you doing? What you've been up to? It's all very surface. I'm not like that. I like to get in there and know about people. And when people open up and talk about issues they've got, problems they've got, and that could be in a pub, you know, it doesn't, it's not that I'm against pubs, but I'm just against that very superfluous blah, blah, blah. But when you can talk to somebody on a much deeper level, I enjoy it. So one-to-one coaching won't go away. I've got my online trainings that I do and they're live. I have thought about doing recordings, but I'm still a big fan of live. And so if it's midlife that people are struggling with, they can go to the website, engagewithsuccess.com, and they'll find a couple of things on there. There's one called Midlife, and they can read all about that. And then in February, there'll be something called I do several throughout the year, called an accelerator. And that accelerator is on Zoom, so you can be anywhere in the country or anywhere on the planet, because we've had people from other countries participate too. And it literally helps them gain their momentum. So we get them motivated, we start to get them mobilized or into motion, and then we get momentum gain. So that's all available on the website. They could see that. And that's just over 2 nights. I was very fortunate to work with the European Space Agency, and they asked me to go and talk to them about life balance. So they're all working very hard, very committed to what they do, but their life balance wasn't great. And then recently I got called by a guy in America who also works with the Space Agency, and they've asked me if I consider going out there. And then I worked in LA and Vegas last year, and I talked to people about midlife momentum. So I don't like to call it crisis, because we're not interested in the crisis. We're interested in moving forward. We're interested in the momentum. And I've been invited to go and do an event for midlife momentum. And that there's going to be 3,000 people in the audience, they've said,
Oh, fantastic.
and 1 million people online. So that's a pretty big event.
Wow,
So
that is
we'll see.
amazing.
So could be an epic year. And then, of course, I've got my retreats as well. I do 3-day retreats, and they're a joy as well, because I stay at the retreat. I don't go home in the evenings. I don't leave the hotel. I stay with the people. We go to the swimming pool, go to the spa, and we all have dinner together, just 20 people at a time. And that's a
Nice.
really, really deep connection that you have with those people at the end of 3 days.
So to wrap everything up, what would be your final 5 top tips to get started and make 2025 a year that you won't forget is going to be a brilliant year?
Okay. Number one, get clear on what you want. What is it you really, 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 really want? And I'm doing all the reallys because that is important, because when you first ask somebody that, they're probably going to go, oh, a bigger house, more money. It's very subliminal. But when they start to really think about it, then they go deeper and deeper and deeper. That's when they might come across the idea that, do you know what, that's not really what I want. Or I've got that idea in my head because somebody else has got a bigger house, or mum and dad always wanted a bigger house, and it's not even their own goals. So there's number one, get clear on what it is that you want. Number two, change something, whatever it might be. Find out what's the most, prioritize it. What's the number one thing that you could do? What would make the biggest difference in your life? So that might be working on your relationships. That might be working on the relationship with the kids or the partner. It could be mum and dad. So just think of one area that you can make a tiny little tweak and see if it makes a difference. Because the moment it makes a difference, that's when you get the light bulb and go, oh, this stuff works. But all the time you're just hearing me talk about it, reading books about it, hearing courses about it, watching YouTube about it. If you don't embrace it and do it, nothing will change. Okay. Number three, I'd say come up with a good morning system. So when you wake up first thing in the morning, very good chance you go and get your coffee, you might go check emails. There's something you do. I don't know what yours might be. You might say, oh no, I have breakfast first. And then what I'm going to suggest is that you do something for you. And that could be as simple as sitting in a chair, closing your eyes, and just taking a few deep breaths. Maybe it's mindfulness. Maybe you like to meditate. If you don't know any of those things, those 3 tools, breath work, mindfulness, and meditation, are super powerful. I think lots of people misunderstand them. What's breath work? I breathe anyway. Mindfulness has been batted around the last, I'm going to say 10 years, and people think that's quite ethereal and doesn't really work. And then you've got meditation, and some people have a very distinct opinion of what that might be. And I think they're probably completely and utterly wrong. All of these tools are about being able to close your eyes and slow everything down. And in fact, if you were to do it right now, immediately after this call, just close your eyes and focus on your breathing, I think you realize actually everything's okay. So that's a really good thing to do. Do that first thing in the morning before you do anything else, and set yourself up for being in a really good place, inner peace within you, so you can move forward throughout the day and try to hold on to that. That's what I would recommend. Then I would say plan your year. Why not plan your year? So rather than just thinking, okay, I know what I want, it's one thing to talk about it. It's one thing to have it in your head. Most people have got that idea in their head, but how are you going to get it? What's your strategy? How are you going to move towards it? So then I think a year's good. Sometimes people talk about 5 years. I often hear 10 years now. I've even heard 25-year plan. That's great. I would say the further away you are, the more vague it's going to be. It's just an idea. You will change. You can change dramatically in a year, let alone 5 or 10 or 25. Life will change. You're guaranteed everything will change. And so work on a year and think, okay, if I'm going to be there in a year, where am I going to be in 6 months? If I'm going to be there in 6 months, where am I going to be in 3 months? If I'm going to be there in 3 months, where am I going to be in a month? Okay, what can I start doing in 3 weeks, 2 weeks, in 1 week? What can I do today? And then start to do a minimum, absolute minimum of one thing a day for yourself. So you might say, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to sit, breathe, I'm going to be very quiet, I'm going to internalize, I'm going to go inside, a little bit of introspection, I'm very calm now, and then have a goal for the day. And that goal could be, I'm going to be happy no matter what. Or it could be, if it's a financial thing, then you've got to do something. Maybe you're going to look for a vehicle. Maybe you're going to look for stocks and shares or cryptocurrency or property, whatever it might be. But if it's financial, how are you going to do it? And these tiny little steps every day can lead you to where you want to get to. And then finally, the last one Learn a new habit. Learn a new habit. Now, don't. Sometimes people say, "Oh, a new habit every day." There's no way that's going to work. Pick a habit and work on it for an entire month. And that could be something simple like, "I'm just going to say hello to everyone. Hi, hi, how are you? Yeah, be friendly." It could be something as simple as that, but do it every day for an entire month. Then move on to your next one, and that might be like, I don't know, it could be you want to eat a little bit better. So I'm not going to eat as many sweets, or I'm not going to eat as many crisps, whatever it is. Again, there's no right or wrong. It's whatever you decide. But start to make these little changes. And if you can do one of those a month, that's 12 new habits in a year, you're rocking it. Is that helpful?
It absolutely is. And I know everyone can, it's easy things to implement. It's nothing to get stressed about. It just starts them on that journey, making those steps from today onwards, which is fantastic. I think people are really going to benefit from all that advice you've given them. And many, I'm sure, will be in touch with you. But I want to thank you for sharing all your wealth and knowledge over the years with us. I know you've taken a lot of time out of your very, very busy schedule. So I'm very, very appreciative and grateful for you for doing that. And I'd like to thank everybody else who joined us today, enjoyed listening to this episode. And we have many more episodes for you to go and listen to as well. But for now, I'd like to thank you for joining us, and a special thank you to Paul Becque for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Unleash Your Inner Athlete. You're clearly a very loyal listener and enjoying the content because you stayed all the way to the end. And that means so much to us here, as I love to see that you are enjoying the content we're bringing to you. And I want to be able to grow the channel more, bring you more fantastic guests, and give you more quality information that are going to help you maintain that quality of life you desire and keep you at peak performance. But in order to do that, I do need to ask one little favour, and that is, could you please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell? Because as the channel grows and we bring you more episodes, I want you to be the very first to get each episode and listen to that episode before anybody else can, as soon as it drops. So just do me that one favour, hit the notification bell, subscribe to the channel, and I look forward to seeing you next time here at Unleash Your Inner Athlete. Thank you so much for joining us.